I want to welcome everybody, and we'll convene the meeting. I think we understand Tim Robinson won't be here, but so I think we're all here. So, Mr. Treasurer, can you call the roll, please?
Yes. Ms. Hudson?
I'm here.
Ms. Gibbs?
Here.
Mr. Peretti?
Here.
Ms. Zaranen?
Yes.
Mr. Hemphill?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Here.
And Mr. Robinson? You have a quorum.
Very good, thank you. So our first order of business will be to review and approve the October 15th meeting minutes. Okay.
Second.
Any additional discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Motion carries. With that, we'll go to the October financials.
Okay, you have before you not only the management discussion and analysis for the month of October, you should have also received the what now appears to be the blue bar report of our monthly financials. And I will I'll run through the presentation that I intend to present to make to the board next Tuesday evening. The total revenues year-to-date just right around $327 million versus our estimate of $331 million. Expenditures about $269 million on a plan of $280. Cash balance is somewhat ahead of plan for the month. Looking at variances against our current plan, revenues are about $4.2 million under, or 1.3%. Expenditures just under $12 million under plan so far. We'll go through those variances at 4.2%, and overall revenue, or the ending cash balance, is up about $7.5 million. I was going through this is the actual breakdown on revenues, various categories, and then looking at the variances. General property tax, first line, there is no change from the previous months. The next expected activity will be in January, when property tax advances begin to flow after bills go out in December. Money starts coming in January. We request advances on a pretty regular basis, and that's the next time we'll see activity there. Graphically, just showing you that nothing's changed since last we met. Year-to-date, we're still on target at about $183 million versus $187 million in the plan. Looking at state foundation, that variance is about, for both lines, 1.035 and 1.040, about $3 million ahead of our plan. And as you recall, the plan was simply an even month-to-month receipt of what we estimated on an annual basis. The October month jumped up because when they implemented the provisions in the budget bill, they have a little catch-up provision. So this should level itself back to about 24 million in those monthly payments each time. And that has borne itself out in the November 1 payment that we've already received. So we should see that come back down pretty much above where the first couple of triangles are, but still within that blue bar. So we should level ourselves out. Again, on an annual basis, just graphically, we're pretty much right on track there. I looked at annualized numbers for these two lines in terms of state revenue, and again, tracking this over time, updating it through the month of October. As you can see in the May forecast, we had estimated about $293 million. In the plan, we have $293 million. The October forecast, we bumped that up a bit to $299, and now we see that the state documents are telling us about $297. So we're plus or minus $2-3 million on an annualized basis, based upon the best information we have, should be receiving around this $297 million on this line. So no real changes since the last time we met. So for these our two major sources of revenue, where we are today is pretty much where we were last month. Last month, if you recall, there was a shortfall relative to plan because property tax allocations had not come in yet. I just wanted to show you here that I've updated this chart to indicate the $16.3 million that did come in the month of October for property tax allocations, and that I think brings us to within about $319,000 of our plan. So that's back on track as we expected. Updating our year-to-date graph. Not terribly exciting, but I guess that's what we like
That's
at
good.
these kinds of meetings. No surprises and no real excitement, I'm sorry. But we're tracking right on top of the plan.
We want to stay in the lines on that.
We want to stay
if
in
at
the
all
lines.
possible.
For my own edification, I like this kind of graphical representation of the variances month to month. In this particular case, the closer the bars are around the zero line, the less variance we have. You can see that in September, primarily because of that property tax allocation money not coming in on a timing issue, we then return to a little bit more towards the zero variance line, and that morphs into this right here where we're about $4 million off of plan. So all in all, on the revenue side, we're right wherever we think we should be. And when we looked at the annualized numbers from the two major revenue sources, there's nothing right now that tells us that we need to modify those estimates for the balance of this year. So we're doing good on the revenue side. Over to expenditures. This is the aggregate listing of all the expenditure lines. Operating expenditures totaled just over $264 million. We have about $269 million all in for the month. Looking at the variances, personnel is running $1 million under plan, about 0.6%, so we feel good about that. Our estimates seem to be holding true. All other non-personnel line items, save for charter schools, are running under plan. Now, this is controlled by appropriation, so running under plan, while it's good, we believe that it's kind of a reversion to the mean issue. Over time, those expenditures will probably pick up, but we'll stay within our appropriation, and therefore there's no need to adjust our plan or adjust our forecast for the end of the year at this point. We don't see anything there. We have, yes?
Oh, I just wondered if you would talk a little more about the charter school number, and is that from the prior spike?
Yes, that's where I'm going.
Okay.
That's exactly where I'm going. Charter schools against the original plan are running over, but if you recall, this is kind of, we got a slide ahead of me, which is okay. But again, all the other lines are running under plan. We expect that to work itself out and come a bit more in line with plan. If it doesn't, that's fine. I mean, if we run under plan on expenditures, as long as we're doing what we programmatically intended to do, we're doing fine.
Yeah. Can we go back to the slide? Then I'll parking lot that. I did just it's a pretty big number for the capital outlay that is under. Is that a timing issue? Is that just timing?
Yes,
Or I'm just wondering if, Scott, is that anything you want to comment on?
That's a number that, when I looked at that, that's one that jumped out as me as well.
Yeah.
So we're going through our quarterly monitoring reports. We believe, because typically you would anticipate that to be closer.
Yes.
Because most of those capital outlay things are at the beginning of school. So we need to go back and look at those and see if there's some very specific projects that were identified mid-year as opposed to beginning of the year. Because usually you see a higher percentage of that done at the beginning of school.
Because we know that we didn't make a lot of investment in that line, so we want to make sure we're working with the investments we did make, so.
And this variance, again, is relative to using last year's expenditure pattern as the pattern for this year.
Okay.
Question. It's too slides ahead.
Okay. Getting to the school choice options, as you recall, I presented this at the last meeting, and what we have here in the red line, I guess is the best that you can see it, is our plan, and it's overlaid essentially right on top of fiscal 15 numbers. And what our plan this year didn't take into account was that last year, the enrollment numbers for charter schools weren't reflected until late April. And that caused a bump in those numbers. We should have evened that out, so I created the green line on the graph, which is an adjusted plan, just assuming 1/12 of our annual estimate comes out as a reference point. And as you can see, the actuals are tracking closer to that reference point than not. Against plan, the original plan, we're showing 6 million over, 6.5 million over, but against that modified plan, that adjusted plan, we're running about 1 million under. I believe I sent everyone a notice we got from ODE about the numbers on charter schools will be out in late November, December. And it's at that time frame that we'll see them reflected in the state foundation reports that we get, and we'll see variances and deductions that will likely occur one way or the other. By the time we get to January, we'll have a better picture of what that should look like on an annualized basis. So we'll be 4 months ahead in our knowledge than where we were last year.
So I have a question. When we get those numbers, at some point, can we just get a breakdown of exactly the allocation, the distribution? Because we say charter STEM scholarships, but I want to know how much exactly is charter, how much exactly is STEM, and how much exactly is going to scholarship, and then what is in the et cetera item?
Sure.
Just not for this format, but can you give me that data?
Yes, yes. And I believe in our agenda, we have scheduled for
Yeah.
January a discussion of charter school enrollments. Not that I can't get that cost breakdown before then, but this will play well because we've scheduled it for January. We should have enrollment numbers for January, and then we can show that breakdown. I will tell you just real quickly, charter schools is the bulk of the expense. They're the large one.
Would that be okay to wait for that January deep dive?
I'd actually like to get it first so I can read it and be prepared for January, and just want to know maybe not just the dollars, what numbers are they representing? I know it represents a lot of money, but what are the numbers that are associated with it as well? I would just like that, so when we're talking about it, I'll have a better grasp than just lumping it together. Because if it's only 20 scholarships, then that's a different picture than to say it's all.
I think that was the January, the deep dive was to give everybody time to get it all done once the numbers come in and not bump too close to the holidays and everything, so.
I just happen to have a number, no, I don't know if I should. Thanks.
So that number, I'm mostly concerned about the annualized number, which is what I do on this graph.
Right.
And I take monthly numbers and annualize them. I look at annual numbers on the state reports, trying to see, are they in sync? And it looks like our adjusted plan is just under 165 million, and everything I'm getting from the state and when I see the actual, we're running plus or minus around 160 million. So we don't have that 20, at least for now, based upon what we know, don't have that $22 million surprise we had in April of last year. So that's good. I make no promises about November and December. So, but you'll be the first to know after I get the email.
Well, we're hoping that that purple bar is kind of like the limbo bar.
Yeah, we stay
To
under.
go under it.
Yes, we'll do our best. Look at a monthly expenditure flow, breaking personnel out from non-personnel. The only thing remarkable here is the month of October. And if you recall, I mentioned last month that we get some aberration in the supply line because there's a warehousing function that runs through there where we purchase materials, warehouse them, and then charge them off. So if you, in this particular case, have a $7 million expenditure for that warehousing line to stock up, if you will, until that's charged off, you don't see those reversing entries. And if you do it in a month that is a different month than what you did last year, you get a blip like that. So don't be alarmed by that month to month, because on an annualized basis, we're sitting right on top of our plan numbers. And quite frankly, that could be a record setter. Like I said, there's not anything dramatic or alarming to report. I think that's good, and that concludes my monthly financial report in 15 minutes. Thank you.
All right.
No, Mr. Purdy, you may not ask questions. Your question was also asked because Board Member Gibbs echoed your questions about charter schools and where's the money going.
I was just going to ask you to do it again, since I missed it.
Oh.
I was just joking.
Does the committee have any questions for the treasurer? Didn't mean for for the less eventful of our reports, but that's okay.
That's a good thing.
Yes,
That's-
yes.
We don't want events. We finally check.
Right. So with that, do you want to, if there are no additional questions, the treasurer has an update on your visit with the Tyler folks and open checkbook, et cetera? Time out for a technical issue?
Sure, no, that's fine. We're getting ready for our food service presentation,
Oh,
which will be
okay.
another PowerPoint. Just wanted to give you an update on our work towards the open checkbook work. Four of us spent some time with our ERP software provider, and we actually met with them all the way from the CEO down to the developers, and I was kind of involved at the top end, and the rest of the group was in the middle, and at the very end, they brought in the developers and talked about their, I don't know whether it's correctly referred to as a partnership, but certainly utilization of Microsoft's, some of Microsoft's latest, what they call BI analytics, business intelligence analytics, and the dashboarding and the interactive graphs that you could do. So I was really excited about that because I get excited about the ability to display the data and make it interactive so you can actually ask questions in sentence form and the data will change. That's pretty cool. I'm still learning about that. But that's the latest that we've seen. It enhances the opportunity with our current provider, but we still are looking at I believe the group is called OpenGov, that is the backbone for the Treasurer of State's online checkbook program. So we're still looking at it. We've seen some very exciting things. We're paying close attention to the interface between our data and whatever the analytic is that we use. How smooth is that? Who has control of it? All of that to make sure that we get what we want, but we also have pretty good control over our data. So that's where we are right now.
So what's a time frame, do you think, to bring it back with a decision?
To bring it back for a decision.
Yeah.
How about January? Is that good?
If that's
I'll make
Sure.
a commitment to bring
Okay.
you a recommendation in January.
good.
So we'll put my staff on notice that they have to have their recommendation to me by December, that we'll get there. And then, once we decide the direction to go, I don't know how long, we'll figure out how long implementation actually is.
I mean, the decision is just step one, so.
Yeah, decision's beginning of the process, so. But it looks good, it's very, very exciting. And the other neat thing about this is it will grow over time as we use it. We can actually, I believe, see what questions folks ask so that we can kind of pre-program that so that it's a selection that they can look at.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Madam Chair?
Yes, thank you.
Because you're talking about topics related to budgeting and other areas, I wanted to take this opportunity, if I may have a point of personal privilege here, and just speak to the wonderful job that Treasurer and Budget Director Gooding and Chair Hudson did at the OSBA Capital Conference this week. They did a great presentation on our zero-based budgeting, and it was well received and very well presented. So I just wanted everyone to know what a great job they had done, and that we are actually a statewide model that others are looking to. And I know we're not done.
Right.
We're going to continue to refine, but just well done, job well done, and made Columbus look very good.
So the Capital Conference for our non-district board members is the Ohio School Board Association. They have a big conference, it's a couple days, so we did this on Tuesday. And the participants were mostly school treasurers who sat way in the back of the room. They kind of wanted to hide like they weren't, but this is Scott and Stan really, took the, carried the water on it, but they're causing a stir, and there were treasurers that came up afterwards and said, we really want to do this, and where folks are nervous about this, and it really is, we really are plowing some really good, fair new ground.
Actually, Ms. Hudson, many board members came up afterwards and said, we'd really like to do this, and our treasurer colleagues came up to us and said, gee, thanks a lot.
Right. Because in most districts, the budget director and treasurer position are combined.
Right.
So it's, but it was a good way to get the message out, so.
And there was one internal auditor. The city of Dayton added the internal auditor function. He was in the presentation, Ms. Carol. So,
Yeah.
everyone has their eyes on us.
So, well, yeah, very good. Thank you, President Baker. And I acknowledge President Baker here. I think everybody knows Gary here. So, Mr. Treasurer, do you want to just continue on down the agenda?
I'll plow right into the next item.
Okay.
One of our future open discussion items, some time ago, after the state budget was adopted, we discussed the possibility that there might be some legislative action, there might be a veto override of some of the line items. And the latest information we have is Senate Bill 208 passed both houses. It was put on the governor's desk today for signature. It changes, rectifies, I guess, in our perspective, some of the issues with the tangible personal property reimbursement. Doesn't do anything for fiscal 16 or 17, but for 18 it means to us about $3.3 million more in a reimbursement than we had planned, and it stretches the reimbursement or the phase out to another year, fiscal 19, in which we'll receive probably $630,000. All in, roughly, give or take a couple $100,000, be about $4 million. For fiscal 18, where we've gone in the forecast negative about $5 million, that means that we're probably, if we would redo the forecast right now with just that piece of information, we'd be about 1.6, 1.7 in the deficit. Not where we want to be, but we'd like to move in that direction. So that's the update on that, and it can come off our agenda now.
Ms. Gibbs, did you have a question? Okay. I think to that point, though, and thank you, that's a good so we'll take everything we can get in there. We had, I'm wondering if, so we had talked, I think, 2 meetings ago about kind of understanding better, if there were additional revenue sources, where we were in terms of identifying, are there abatements or other possible revenue sources that that may be in the future that wouldn't be included in that forecast. I'm just wondering if that's close, if that's something we could talk about at our next meeting.
All in progress, or progress or process, one or the other.
Is the process progressing?
With progress is progressing. Part of it is talking about the TIFs that are out there. Part of it is potential, abatements. Don't know that oftentimes if something is abated, it's permanent. TIFs have a life. I've learned though of the, geez, I forget how many there that was said the other day at the meeting with Auditor Dorian, but all of them are non-school district TIFs, so they aren't diverting the tax dollars from the school district.
Right.
We were held harmless, if you will, in those. So that's good news. That's my latest piece of information. Don't have my arms around all of it quite yet, but so far what we've learned is good news in that we're not going to gain something in the future because we never gave up anything in the first place on those TIFs. And there are quite a few TIFs in the district.
That's good. So, but I think it's I think kind of two issues, and I'll open up for the committee to talk about. But one, so with that deficit we show in 18, I think it would be important that we between the treasurer and the budget director to come back to us with at least some scenario information of what type of efficiencies, budget cuts, et cetera, would we need to fill that hole? you know, and I think you also had the 30-day cash number, so to get us to zero, but also to get us to where we need to be. And likewise, if we had to raise revenue, what would that look like?
Yes.
So, you know, I recall at one point, you said, you know, if we did some type of levy in 16, it would be, maybe we were just, it would be, you know, 3 mills to fill, but if we waited till 18, it'd be 7. And, you know, so that we could kind of see what that progression would look like.
I have prepared an interactive spreadsheet, if you will, so you can see, and we could do the what-if game right here in real time, based upon current valuations, what a mill generates, what deficits you're trying to cover, or what balances you're trying to achieve at the end of what year, and you can make the suggestion of how many mills and what year we vote, and see how it flows through. I think that's the best way. That's how I learned it,
Yeah,
to
and
see
so-
that
and
impact.
I would think for us, it would just be a discussion about, you know, what's our fiscally responsible amount to talk to the board about, and what does that look like, so that the board would have ample information to consider as we move forward.
And then
Yes.
the treasurer certifies a 3-year, is that a 3-year look out? Like you have to look at the budget and say, yes, we can cover this for 3 years, or what is the, am I understanding?
Yeah, there's a magic about 3 years. So with contracts and other issues. isn't that
Well,
right?
yeah, it has to do with where the deficit falls and whether or not we can sign a certificate on contracts that go over the end of a year, so,
That's why our CEA contract is 2 years.
yes.
Yeah.
You're going to certify the budget for a certain period, okay.
But if the 8, so right now with our, well, what are the ramifications? So right now with our forecast showing still a deficit, even with the new TPP dollars, will we at some point have receive notice from the state with a concern about that?
We could. I doubt that that would happen, given the materiality of that deficit. I don't think that's a large enough issue to trigger
Okay.
a reaction at this point. Certainly haven't heard that yet.
Okay.
Do you
It's
agree?
financial
If
distress.
we were sitting in 17, we'd probably get a letter, because there's 3 categories that they'll look at the forecast, and a percentage of that balance will trigger a possible letter, maybe some action by the board, but I don't think looking 3 year out, we're there yet. We're a year away from that.
We're scheduled to get, I think this quarter, something back regarding the capital assessment of all of the buildings that are not new. And so I'm sure that will play a role in determining what type of financial impact to address that capital deferment. I mean, that building deferment, we'll be curious to understand that.
Well, I think though, that isn't that this would be the general fund.
It's different dollars.
So there'd be different, they're actually sort of different buckets.
You can only use, so when you use bond dollars to build school buildings, those dollars cannot be used for other things.
No, you're right. I'm saying though, the way we're currently addressing our capital deferment is coming out of general fund dollars. So if you're trying to go out to ask for more money based on your forecast, my recommendation was, let's understand the impact of the deferred maintenance on all of our buildings that are not new, right? Recognizing that based on how they score them, the ones that are determined to be demolished and rebuilt, you would use bond dollars for those, but for the ones that they're telling you to retain, putting, you know, the resources out of the general fund to address them needs to be revisited so that it has a dedicated, my recommendation, you have a dedicated line item. And if you're going to make a request, make sure that that scope is in that request, so
Yeah.
that you're not putting a patch, a Band-Aid on an open wound.
leadership team that's discussing that and preparing some information in anticipation of
The ad, or,
Board Member Paredes, the board committee, but you're.
so what we're doing is,
Chair,
so
have
the
you done
ad, there's an ad hoc committee that was created to look at the master facilities plan, not only at buildings, but attendance zones, grade bands, as well as an academic lens on it as well. Right now, we are reaching out to a third party to help us analyze the data, because it's sort of like redistricting. You move a street here, there, what is the impact on the populations? We'll be looking at all the buildings and be spending several months parallel to this, it's sort of the same, but we'll be looking at a lot of those things from January through around April, I would imagine, at the facilities picture, what we have, what we can do, preparing options and menus, basically, of suggestions and recommendations of, what we could possibly do in the district, and that'll feed in to that other part of the question that you're bringing up, as well as, when you talk about, a levy ask, this is a big part of it. It's a big step. So it's definitely something that's being looked at as well.
And we do, I think this might be specific, very specific to your question, and that is we do discuss the fact that if a building is 3 years out to being renovated or demolished or rebuilt or whatever we're going to do with it, that there are 3 years of ongoing maintenance that could get rather, it's going to be expensive to keep a building going. And what do you do just to maintain it before, because you've still got to use it? So that is a consideration. It's there are a lot of moving parts, but that's part of
That's
it,
right.
certainly.
But is it safe to say that the current structure now is to allocate money out of the general fund to support the deferred maintenance and ongoing emergencies that pop up? And so if that's a feeder to your operations, which sends you negative, as you do your forecast, I think we talked before about understanding what that real number is based on the score that was going through right now, in partnership with, I forget the state agency that's helping to help score.
Facilities.
Right. So once that's, those results are back, it will certainly give some guidance with respect to what should come out of the general fund to address that.
So, Board Member
Question, and
Gibbs?
to that point, who feeds the data into the line item for deferred maintenance? Does that come out of USHA? Facilities and operations, Odom and Lozati?
He's right behind you. He's answering your question, I think.
Yes.
Buildings and grounds.
Buildings and grounds.
But it's really a dual. Buildings and grounds is the key program. There's some things that may be capital improvement side as well, so we can collaborate
Oh,
as
do
well.
you want to come up here,
I'm sorry.
Maurice? Oh, thank you.
Yeah, you said by the corner there.
Afternoon.
Hello.
So buildings and grounds is the keeper of assessing the buildings for the capital, for deferred maintenance. And we constantly updating, and we're in the process also of prioritizing, giving priority 1, 2, and 3 on those items. We also collaborate closely with capital improvement, so there might be capital items that we need to also get their assessment on as well. So it's really a team effort, but the originator and keeper is buildings and grounds.
Thank you. As we move closer in these deliberations, to your point, doing deeper dives in that is going to be imperative because we have new buildings that now need maintenance. And so a very good and very timely request and recommendation.
And if I may, when we look at that, just so you know, it is a living document. And that's something we got to keep in mind. So there's items that as we see we can address, we go ahead and address. But again, there may be other items that come up that we didn't know before. So we make sure it's a living document and become part of our culture. So we're constantly looking at it.
Thank you.
Well, let's start, I don't think, this next set of discussions, I think is just a beginning. So certainly, I think to that point, see where that is right now, and then I think, then we'll have some information that the committee can make recommendations of additional analysis, so. I don't know, yeah, please, Joe.
I'm just curious if other districts would have their maintenance in a bond issue. I mean, is this normal to kind of have the building and the bond and the maintenance and the levy?
There was a piece of the, I think I'm correct, there was a part of a piece of the levy that went to maintenance, but it's just out of money.
The half mil.
Yeah, so you run out eventually.
Or the bond, you're saying? Or
Yeah.
the bond, okay.
Yes,
Just curious. I mean, it's
go
all
ahead.
Taxpayers.
These two, especially Mike, can speak to the history here, but in general for school districts, when you hit a budget crisis and you begin to cut items, unfortunately, one of the first places everybody looks is you stop taking care of the buildings. You cut back on your maintenance. And I know in other districts that I've been in, when we've gone to a bond issue and we've collected a large volume of maintenance items to bond it out, and so you're borrowing money for 20, 25 years. Many of the folks from the private side would say, well, wait a minute, this is an annual, ongoing operational expense to maintain your buildings as opposed to a investment in a fixed asset that has a 20 or 30-year life. You shouldn't be doing that. But practically speaking, we get caught in public education in that cycle of looking for a place to cut. So you stop cutting the grass, you stop doing this, you stop, because that's just where you look instead of, we're not going to stop teaching third grade.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? We look to that, and then eventually you get $50 million of deferred maintenance built up, and you need to address that very quickly. So the shot in the arm is to try and capitalize that, but that doesn't necessarily mesh real well with what private sector expectations would be.
Yeah. My only recommendation is that you don't get caught, because when you defer maintenance so much, you start to accelerate the useful life deterioration. And, it sounds nice, but if all your heating units go out, or if you start having, plumbing or other mechanical issues, you're going to use emergency dollars to address it, because you can't occupy the space until you get it in accordance. So the reason I make it I'm an advocate for it is just because I've seen the impact of it, and it's certainly something that it will bite you if you don't make provisions. And that's why I'm curious about, the levy ask is for operations for the district itself, so that's just one component that can, I think, not necessarily be bondable over an extended period of time, but more of your operational side, so you can address deferment. I mean, some of the buildings are just old, and if they're not deemed to be demolished, they just need to be given a strategy. That's all.
And OSFC requires that $500,000 permanent improvement levy, which segregates funds, but it's limited to those buildings that they help build.
That's right.
Okay.
Okay?
Interesting.
No, I
So
understand.
They already recognize that hey, we're going to help you build this. We know down the road you're going to have to maintain it.
That's right.
So you have to put in $500,000.
That's right. But I want to wait till we get that information that we had talked about a couple months
Okay.
back, because that'll help provide clarity on.
Maybe we could schedule to at least get updated on where the process is in January.
Yeah, that's fine.
And then we'll see,
Yeah.
where, because it's,
Absolutely.
there's a pretty involved process that's
That's right.
in the works here,
It's on our list. It's on our
Okay.
list.
Yes.
First quarter next year.
So, and if if we think in this, well, let's see where we are, and we can at least touch base on this issue at the December meeting, and then see what the committee, what's the will of the committee after that. So I want to be sensitive. I know we've got a good deep dive after this. Scott, do you have an update on the 17 budget timeline?
Yeah, oh my.
FY17.
We are moving, and we've been moving.
Yes.
I think the only change we had on the timeline that was there is we did, thanks to Joe Brown and Steve Simmons. Steve was unavailable to be here to provide the update on the transportation, so Joe stepped up, and we're going to do food service this month, transportation next month. Just a heads up, and President Baker and the rest of the board heard this in the presentation that we did this just a couple days ago. what you're gonna see in the spring is gonna be definitely more detailed than what we've done, with a longer look. The first phase that we went through with the budget process we went through last year, which was very extensive and very publicly debated, was that one-year budget process. So what we're trying to now do is move that process and do it for a multi-year piece. So we're working with our folks internally. We've been prepping for that, because I think it makes sense, because we as a district and Stan, he's doing a 5-year forecast, but he's only taking our one-year budget process and replicating that for each of the 4 years. So the thinking behind that is, we hear people talk about, we're doing our strategic plan. Well, when are we going to talk about the budget? When are we going to talk about budget? We do every day. Everything that we do, all these programs that we're doing, the budget is a result of the strategic plan that we're doing. So what we want to come back with is look at our programs and services over the next 5 years, budget over the next 5 years, which will feed into the forecast. So that'll be, and I think in the present 5-year forecast process that we did, there were 3 slides that were specifically items called out about what's not included in the 5-year forecast that Dr. Good mentioned. That's the work. That's what we need to map out for the next 5 years so that we can talk through that, and at any point look at that 5-year forecast and say in year 3, we're going to do this program. And obviously we need to look at the changes from 1 year to the next. So that's a big piece that we're doing. What we did this last year was a huge change. This is another really, really big change, because now we're not looking at just this year. We're having to look multiple years. So we'll still have the board approve the budget on an annual basis, but we're going to plan it for 5 years. And then we know we're going to have to make changes every year. Something's going to come up. We're going to have to adjust that, and then that will be in the annual budget that the board approves. So we're looking at a 5-year plan that'll feed into the 5-year forecast, as well as with our staffing. We've been working very hard on that to come up with research-backed data on metrics on how we allocate all of our staff to departments, to buildings, every position across the district. So we're really getting really, really, really detailed on these. So you'll see some things presented differently in a much greater detail than what we did in the past, but we're hoping that we won't have to do another 38 hours of presentation for you, because we've been through that. So we're going to get more efficient.
Maybe they want to.
Maybe they want it?
I don't know.
Okay.
Well,
I think those were laughters of fear is what
we
it
want it to
was.
be informative and thorough, and,
But
but
we think we
certainly
can be more
efficient.
efficient in those,
Yes.
as we get through that, because everybody's now more comfortable and familiar with the process. So we'll be able to really jump in much quicker than what we've done in the past, but we know what's coming forward is going to be yet another a huge change that we've done. But it's some of the things that, as President Baker talked about, that we shared with colleagues statewide, and they really like that, because we're doing the work every day, and we joke about it as I guess I'll call us the bean counters, but once we know what those programs and services are, we're putting dollars and cents to those programs. We're doing the math.
Yeah, we want it to be behaviorally data-driven, if you will, not just, I'll take myself, not just me sitting in office going, well, I think it should be this. Well, when we get to that not coming true, what's the explanation? Well, I just was wrong. Well, instead, if we have this 5-year laid out behavioral data-driven budget, then we can point very specifically to see what's going on. And this is I think it's probably as big or bigger a jump than what we did this past year. So,
But I mean, if you look at textbooks, we did mathematics textbook adoption last year. We're not doing it again this year. So year 1 will be mathematics, year 2, and I'm just picking the subject, social studies, science, English language arts. Each year something's different, so we need to look at those things and work with the teams. So we're making sure that they're not overwhelmed. This is a huge jump, but we're there supporting them through that. So what you're going to see in the spring is definitely going to be a little bit different. So
I have a question. Do we have enough internal bandwidth for all of this? We talk about a lot of things that we want to do. We talk about, just want to make sure that our folks understand that it's good to know where we are internally when it comes to all of this, when it comes to the ad hoc committee and putting that process together with the staff that we have, going through another budgeting, and like you say, you're upping the game again with the annual budget and a 5-year plan, as well as a 5-year forecast. My only concern is like fatigue And do we have enough people sometimes? And it's not like, you know,
And
magic.
and
You know, so
sustain-
I-
yeah.
just keep us informed if there's anything that
Absolutely.
we need to know about that.
We know this is a huge change, and some of the work that we're doing at the Government Finance Officers Association, when we went and spent time in Chicago talking through that, part of that is that there's a commitment from the district to have a fiscal person, but also an academic person. So there were districts that brought teams with them, so that it wasn't just the fiscal side driving things, saying, hey, you're going to do this, you're going to do this. Everybody came through and talked through that because it's big. And I think when they see that we're doing the budget, we're doing budget work every day. It's the strategic plan that's driving everything, where traditionally districts have operated the mindset that, well, they're separate. You know, we're going to go do a strategic plan and you guys do the budget over here. It's this. So once they see this and get it, it's not as cumbersome as they think it is. So we're definitely holding hands, but the bandwidth piece is a concern we have, so we are watching that. Because we know we've got a lot of balls that we're juggling in the air. We just got to make sure that we can. We've got a lot.
Board Member Gibbs, did you have?
Yes, and it sounds really good. I would just want to know how, because last year was the first year of a pilot, right, for zero-based budgeting. How are you going to, I don't know, fix that and make sure that's solid before you then go into multi-year budgeting? I mean, I know the first year's a pilot, but if you can replicate it with efficiencies, then we know it's great. But if we don't use the same process, I think I'm hearing some of your concerns, then how do we know that we're taking staff down something totally different again? And then in that new process, that's one. In the new process, where is the public education, public information? I didn't see that in this budget. Back to the timeline.
Yeah, I think
Where are we going to tell the community or explain the budget?
It's kind of embedded in these. So anytime there's a public meeting like this meeting or the Board of Education meeting, those are all opportunities where we'll be there to put that information out there. Obviously, we'll have, this will be on, I think, I'm looking at Paul, I think we have this on YouTube and things like that, that we'll be doing, making sure there's a lot of orchestrated communication around that so folks know and have an opportunity to hear those presentations, view the presentations, provide feedback as necessary, because we want to make sure that we're not doing this in isolation, but that folks know what we're doing. And the replication piece, I mean, it's not, the new piece of it is doing what we're doing, but then also looking forward. So we know we're going to have to make changes to it each and every year, but we're just looking out to years 2, 3, 4, and 5 is what are we doing? So I think year one's going to be that baseline piece that we'll see, and then looking at that and making some assumptions as we project years 2 through 5.
So I had two comments to that. One was, I think so when we started last year, I mean, I think you certainly did talk about building this out, and that, you know, this current budget we're in was a framework. So this is kind of the next piece of adding to the chassis. I would say too, this budget timeline, in terms of public engagement, now, I mean, the board can use this, as the board plans its calendar for the next calendar year, can use this to identify if and where we'd want public engagement.
And so since we're talking about the timeline now, I thought this would be really good say, where does it go? And when and where, according to this timeline, would it make sense if we have, and make sure we use the correct terms, we have a public meeting, but are you envisioning any time for public input and public comment in this next process? Because that's different. So if you're saying this is a public meeting, we're discussing it and you can see it on TV, that doesn't mean people get to comment. So how do you see incorporating public input and comment into this process, in this timeline, the one we're talking about?
Yeah, I think, you know, obviously at any public board meeting, there's the opportunity for public to show up to comment on that, or we can also look at providing an opportunity through the website to see if folks wanted to, you know, obviously email if we put some information on the website to give them that opportunity as well. Those are just some other avenues that we can do. And
I think what Board Member Gibbs is saying is we have a meeting designated at some point here where the budget is kind of baked enough that we could let the public know if you have comments.
Right.
The board would like to hear it. And so I think it would be, maybe you could come back and to tell us, when do you feel like it would be, we don't want it fully cooked,
Ding, ding, ding.
but we want it cooked enough that we could have a presentation, and maybe that's that, and it's an initial presentation to the board. The board sees it, then maybe the board has a special meeting after that to take comments, and then it continues forward. So I think we did that with our multiple finance committee meetings.
Right.
So whether it's, having that on top of, with the finance committee to hear those comments, or having a special session and then sharing those comments with the finance committee, inviting folks.
Right. I know in May and June are the 4 meetings that they're identified here. I mean, if we wanted to look at doing that earlier or a separate meeting, I mean, that's something we could look at,
So
obviously, doing as well.
so it's at a time that it gives your team, enough time to react or address anything, questions, because I think that would then informs the board, community thoughts on the plan and the budget. But then also, so it gives the board time to comment, and then it gives your team time to appropriately advise and react. Is that?
Exactly. We don't want to, probably shortly after you have a general framework, when we say this is where we're going to be, because there's a lot of conversation that should precede it, is when it should come out. But right after that, in a separate meeting, in a work session, we should give people an opportunity to.
There are many public bodies, they'll do it with their finance, either finance committee or the whole body. They'll have a dedicated session to take public comments, and some people come and comment, you ask them to make it towards the budget, and it might be about one particular issue, so there's parameters for those comments, but then everybody has an opportunity. But I think it'll have to be in between when we've got enough out there that there's something to comment on, but it isn't too far down the pike that, if there's something that is that the board wants to ask for that change, you can still do it.
In the past, when we've had levy discussions, once we've had a good framework, we've held just community meetings in the community at our high schools, 2 or 3 different sides of town, so we've presented what we thought, and people could comment right then and there. Sometimes 5 people came, sometimes 100 people came, but there was an opportunity to hear what people were thinking, so we're not presenting something and there's a huge kickback where people don't feel like they know, or it's not in the direction in some areas that the community would support. So we know we're looking at the budget items, so I'm not saying this is levy discussion, but there's precedence for it.
So maybe when you come back at the next meeting, we'll
Absolutely.
identify what would be an appropriate time.
Perfect.
Yes. And when is the drop dead date? This is kind of hard for me to read, but when is the drop dead date, according to this timeline, that you're getting all the information from all the departments? Is that the January 31?
In January 31, you'll see on task item 6.9, department non-personnel budgets are due to the budget office. So typically we'll send out the worksheets in December. They'll work through the month of January to fill those out, send us back to us, and then early February is our internal budget hearings that we'll do, and then we'll come to the committee in February and March for those presentations that we did here with this group.
Okay, that's February, March.
Good. Okay. Any additional questions on the budget timeline right now? Timeline. Thank you. So with that, I think we could call Joe Brown. Joe's on his way up.
Yes,
Joe,
ma'am.
would you mind, can we sit, I think, so everybody can see you, maybe can we move, yes, right here where Tim's seat is.
Certainly can.
Thank you.
That's hungry
Yeah.
You have one right there.
Perfect.
So, if you'd like to introduce yourself and
Yes, ma'am.
the committee and.
I've had the privilege of knowing many of you for several years, but some of you have not had the opportunity to meet yet. My name is Joe Brown. I am the Director of Food Services for Columbus City Schools. And in my presentation, the way my presentation is set up, because, as I said, although some of you have known myself and my department even longer than you've known me, this may be review for you, but some of you maybe aren't familiar with our business model and how we do things. So the first couple slides really talk about at a high level how food service operates. So you have that information to hopefully put everything in context then once we get to some of the details about our performance over the past several years. First and foremost, our goals within food service. These have been consistent for a number of years. Although this is certainly a finance committee, and you'll see our third goal is stewardship of district resources, our primary goal is always supporting the academic achievement of our students. We understand how important nutrition is and the role it serves in making sure our students are prepared to learn. So that is always first and foremost, as well as continue to improve the nutritional quality of those offerings. Just a little bit about myself. I've been with the district for about 7 years. Prior to that, I worked with the management company Aramark. I worked with Ohio Health Hospitals, and I was responsible for their food services within 4 hospitals. And before that, I worked for in restaurants for a number of years. So I have both restaurant, I have institutional experience, healthcare experience, as well as district experience. We do provide over 11 million meals a year. That's 62,000 meals a day. So it is busy. We do keep after it. We have 109 cafeterias, and we have about 400 staff to do that. That includes regular staff as well as substitutes. Again, those staff vary from 8-hour-a-day employees to 3-hour-a-day employees. So there is a wide range. And we have 8 delivery routes, which I'll talk about here shortly. We really have 2 models in the way we provide food service throughout the district. First is our elementary meal process, or that model. And what we have is, at 450 East Fulton Street, we have a food service production center. Now, when that building was built 40 years ago, there was a lot of cooking done in that building. Since then, there is significantly less cooking done in that building, but it's more of a packaging facility. And the way that works is, if you look at the board up there, the food distributors send their trucks to the food service production center. There, my staff will take a case of chicken nuggets and package it in individual packages with 5 chicken nuggets per package, a student's portion. And then there, our delivery routes ship it out to the schools. And our schools, within our elementary schools, have what's called warming kitchens. And in those schools, depending on the size and volume of the meals they do in the school, they'll only have 1 or 2 staff members. And those staff members receive that food, heat, and serve that food for our students. Our secondary meal process is more similar to what you would be used to in a full-service kitchen. Our distributors distribute to all of our different schools. They have full-service kitchens within those schools and cook according to our menus and our recipes to be able to take care of our students. This next slide I'm going to spend a little bit of time on. This is our 3-year financial trend up until this year. Fiscal year 13, you'll notice, is, and many of you know, we used to have a partnership with a management company, and they left prior to this year. So fiscal year 13 was our first full year providing food service operations on our own after they left. And in that year, I'll be honest, our focus was significantly on systems and process. We had a management company that brought their systems and processes in with them. They left. Although they don't take all that knowledge that they came with them, they certainly took their support systems when they left. So one of our major undertakings that year is to make sure that we, without the support of them, had the systems and processes in place to be able to take care of our students. Our projection was to lose $2 million that first year. We did lose $1.75 million. Where I would be hesitant to call that a success, we were pleased the fact that we did have a smooth transition and we were ahead of the projection. The next year, in fiscal year 14, we really focused heavily on controlling our expenses. We did in-depth analysis of many different parts of our operations, and if I could, I'd like to give you an example of how that might work. Simple menu item that we serve is a turkey sandwich. Serve it in all of our schools. On a day we serve them in our elementary schools, we'll serve about 2,500 of them. We would order those sandwiches pre-made, pre-produced, frozen typically, and then we would ship them out to schools about 2,500 times each time they were on the menu. And turkey sandwiches are a staple on our menu because of the fact that they're Kids like turkey sandwiches, they're friendly to allergies, there's a lot of things. So they're typically on our menu in an elementary school 2 to 3 times a week. Our elementary schools have 3 options a week, so it isn't that there's duck steak and a turkey sandwich, but it is certainly one of their options 2 to 3 times a week. The purchase cost of that product was 74 cents. So then we did some analysis and we looked. The turkey itself, for us to produce it, would cost us 24 cents. The bun, 9 cents. Packaging, 4 cents. And the labor, through labor studies of how long it takes to produce those, would cost us 7 cents. So it cost us 44 cents to produce that turkey sandwich that we were paying 74 cents for. $2,500 per run times 80 runs per year, that's 200,000 sandwiches. So when we started making them ourselves, that is a cost savings of $60,000 a year. Another similar example is about a cheeseburger. We were buying it for 86 cents. By the time you added in all those different components, we could purchase it for 74 cents. Now, we don't do cheeseburgers as often. It's only 40 times a year, but we make more of them. We do 100,000 or 10,000 of them every time we do them. So 400,000 sandwiches times that cost savings of, 12 cents, that's $48,000 a year. We did that with everything on our menu. Now, some things it made sense to still buy something externally because they could do it cheaper and better than we could. Other things they couldn't. So by going through our menu and looking at those things, looking at our efficiencies in our operations, working with OPSI in our union to try to reduce extra service and overtime, we were able to significantly reduce our expenses. And we considered it a huge success to go from $1.75 million loss to just over a $3 million loss. Because any of you who are familiar with the food service operation over a long
300,000.
300,000, sorry, thank you. 291,000 to be more specific. But any of you who are more, thank you for paying attention. Anyone who's
That won't
familiar with
catch
our
our
operations
That's
over a longer period of time knows that there were many years that we were losing $3 and $4 million a year prior to working with the management company. So again, we were very pleased with this process or progress that we made. Next, I want to talk about fiscal year 15. The big change that happened in fiscal year 15 is the district moved from having a more standard free and reduced national school lunch program to moving to a program called the community eligibility provision. And moving to community eligibility provision, one of the tremendous benefits of that is all of our students were offered a free lunch and a free breakfast every day. The other thing that did, from our standpoint, is it drove participation, more kids ate, and it also drove revenue. We didn't have to worry about uncollected funds. We didn't have to worry. The reimbursement rate for the free meals were higher than when we were collecting at the schools. So it did cause a significant revenue boom for our district. So you'll notice there, revenue went up to about $30 million. Expenses went up some because we were serving more meals. We had to buy more meals. Labor went up a little bit because if you've got one person in the school and you're serving 100 meals, now you're serving 110, you probably didn't have to add labor. But every so often you get to that tipping point where you got to add a little more to be able to offset that. So labor did not go up at the same percentage that the meals did, significantly less. But we did see a slight increase.
Joe, how many, can you give us an idea, how many more meals, that additional, from 14 to 15? But how many more meals, like number of meals?
Well,
Is that, am I getting ahead of myself here?
you are.
Okay, well then, let's wait, we'll answer that.
But far be it for me to tell you that.
No.
Quick question.
Yeah, we'll just, yes, go ahead.
The community eligibility program, how stable is that, and how do we keep on top of that and sort of the federal government's doings?
Well, it's certainly something the federal government seems to believe is here to stay. The lack of stability, I guess, if you would say, of that program would come around the fact that we run reports annually to determine our CEP eligible students. So those are essentially directly certified students within the district. Directly certified means the state sends us a list saying that these students would automatically qualify. Now, we're able to gather some more students because sometimes when they send that list, there's one student in a household and his brother and sister aren't on there. So we're able to add the brother and sister in. We're able to add our homeless students. We're able to add our foster students. So we're able to add some more to that list. And then that gets us a number. We take that number and we multiply it by 1.6. And when we multiply it by 1.6, then that gives us our percentage that we're able to be reimbursed for at a free rate. Right now, that number gets us to just over 100%. So we are reimbursed at 100%. And we are guaranteed that that rate will stay the same for the matter of 5 years.
Okay.
If that rate declines, then we run the risk of not being able to be reimbursed at 100% throughout the district. The other risk is the USDA, I shared that 1.6 number. The USDA has said that that number will always be between 1.2 and 1.6. They always assure us that they have no plans to change that number from 1.6. That being said, that's at their liberty to do. So if they shift that number from 1.6 to 1.4, then you need a higher percentage to get you to that 100% threshold. Now, we know we're set for a certain time period where we wouldn't have to change anything, but there is the possibility on the offset, on the far end, that if our economical situation in our community improves, that this may not be viable down the road.
So we're set through 2020, 15 through
Yes.
20, 19?
Yeah, 19.
So for the committee, for the 13 and 14, those revenue dollars were a combination of federal monies that came in plus kid lunch money, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Correct?
A little bit
And
of state
then-
money, but not a
So,
whole lot.
and 15, the revenue number is strictly the revenue from the federal government.
90%.
Okay,
We do get we do the summer program where we partner with Columbus Parks and Rec,
okay,
where we serve, they're the sponsor, but we provide them the meals. That equates to over $1 million a summer in revenue. We still sell some a la carte things, especially in the high schools, that aren't necessarily on the menu. It's not significant. I shouldn't say, it depends on your perspective. Typically, it's $30,000 to $40,000 a month. In the in the scale of when we're receiving $3 million in reimbursement versus $30,000, it's a small piece, but it is cash revenue that we do receive.
You probably have teachers and staff that
We do.
buy. Okay.
We do. Yeah, teachers and staff have the opportunity to buy meals as well, so we have some revenue from that as well.
But your big driver is you need participation, and participation is driven by selection that they like, primarily.
In large part. I think there's a number of factors that drive participation, and we'll cover that shortly. But I think in large part, menu is a major driver of participation. I absolutely agree with you.
Yeah.
This next slide just really talks about where we are and where we're projecting to be this year. This is a conservative estimate. I come from the Stan Bihoric School of Conservative Estimation.
It's a good university.
Yes.
There's a scary thought, isn't it?
yeah.
But I would rather estimate conservatively and exceed. So this is a conservative estimate. And you'll notice there is a drop between last year and this year, and there's a couple reasons why. One of them is the conservativeness of the estimate. Another is the fact, let's go back to the capital discussion that seems to be a regular discussion. Food service capital investment needs to come from the food service fund. Food service is a standalone fund. It's an enterprise fund. So thereby, by USDA regulation, food service is supposed to be self-supportive. There was a time where we weren't, but right now we are, and we intend on keeping it that way. Therefore, anything that we need to support the food service fund, be it ovens, be it the concrete floors in my production center, which are a capital expense we're working on right now, be it anything like that, those items need to come out of the capital fund, or come out of the food service fund. As was stated before, when you're running a deficit, typically the things that get cut quickest are those types of capital investments. Not to say we never bought an oven, but for us to buy an oven, the one we had needed to be no longer fixable, no longer usable, so we've really limited. So now we have a plan in order to be able to invest in our facilities. And some examples of those are ovens that we have that are 30 and 40 years old that need replaced. Some of them are the facilities within the production center. The concrete floors underneath the facility are breaking up. So we have to repair those. And not only is that it's a safety issue from a safe floor standpoint that our staff are working on, it's a safety issue for our students, our food's being produced in those areas. Not that we are we are at risk if we don't take care of this stuff in a fairly short time frame, that we can run into problems. So that's the other place that some of this money's going. The other thing we're trying to do, or wait, I shouldn't say trying, the other thing we are doing, as I said, food service is supposed to be a standalone fund. We were profitable last year, so at the end of the year, we had some money in our fund. That being said, like many other areas in the district, we spend money before we get paid. It's lagging because of the federal reimbursement. So this year, we had enough money to cover the first couple months, but then we ran out of money. So now, right now, we have an advance from the general fund to be able to cover those expenses till our money starts coming in, and then we'll give it back. And I'm sure there's more technical jargon for what that is, but
Close enough.
close enough.
So in the, thank you, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I forgot.
please. No, it's okay.
And so we call it rating the Rotary funds in the legislature. Does that happen here when there are extra monies? I mean, I'm just kind of curious, as a district.
Can they rate my funds?
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
And that goes back to those regulations saying that the food service fund is only, those dollars are only allowed to be, so it's a one-way street, unfortunately. If I run a
curious.
deficit,
Yeah.
the general fund has to support the food service fund because you got to provide meals.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if I'm ahead, those funds can only be used to support food service operations. And that sort of thing happens on a fairly regular basis throughout the country, where people have just that idea. And usually it ends up bad eventually because those, again, they need to support this.
So did your surplus from 15 is what you burned through so far this year?
Yes.
And I would have thought with the government not shutting down, that the USDA would be a little more proactive in their response. But
Well, it's just the timeliness in the funding. Usually for meals that we serve in August and September, we don't receive that money until November. So we've got to buy all the food to be able to do that. So reimbursement starts coming in November, and then usually by the time you get to the way we're expected to be here, February timeframe, we'll be back over the other side. But our goal is to have about $6 million. If we have about $6 million by the end of this year in our fund, we should be in a place where we won't have to borrow off the general fund next year to be able to get through. There are limits on how much you can carry in that fund, but right now our goal is to get to a point where we can just sustain ourselves throughout the year, and we don't have to take that short-term loan from the general fund to be able to keep moving. So I'm going to talk about drivers. It goes back to your participation comment. We have some primary drivers that drive our outcomes, some leading indicators or whatever the case may be. The first is participation. Breakfast participation is the first one. Our breakfast participation is 51.8% of enrollment, and those counts were up 10.3% versus fiscal year 15. It surprised us because we did provide free breakfast prior to last year. And although we expected with community eligibility and some publicity we would see a little bit of a breakfast increase, we weren't expecting to see a 10.3% increase. It's a good surprise.
Yeah, that's great.
We'll take it, but we didn't see that much. We do benchmark in the top quartile with the Council of Great City Schools for breakfast participation. The median in the Council of Great City Schools for breakfast participation is 31.9%. On a side note about breakfast, just this week there were 170 schools recognized throughout the state at the conference that you were at.
The School Board Association.
Yes,
Yeah.
the School Board Association conference. There were 170 schools recognized throughout the state. 65 of them were ours. So 65 of the 170 were ours. And if you notice the banners on the wall over here,
Yes.
they are Breakfast All-Stars. There's Platinum Awards, Gold Awards, Silver Awards, as well as Bronze Awards. This was determined by the Ohio Department of Education, the Ohio School Nutrition Association, Ohio Action for Healthy Kids, Children's Hunger Alliance, and the American Dairy Association. Our Platinum Award winners, just so you know, which means they have over 80% participation, is Livingston Elementary, Ohio Avenue Elementary, Sullivan Elementary, Watkins Elementary, and Windsor STEM.
That's awesome.
So yeah, we are very proud of them, and all 65 of those schools will get a banner like that they can display. So we are very proud of that.
So for the board members, we should ask President Baker if that could be featured at the next board meeting.
We would love for that to be highlighted.
It's, well, it's fantastic.
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
very excited about that. Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Is there and this is great, is there constant work to continue educating the public about these programs? You know, are we continually keeping our foot at the pedal when it comes to looking at areas where we think that, you know, we need to up participation even more? I mean, I know it's fantastic, but just being a board member, I'm sorry.
No, and you're right, because as good as it is, 51.8%, great, we're in the top quartile, that's great stuff. There's still 48.2% of our kids that aren't eating breakfast.
Yeah.
And how do we get that, how do we make sure they're aware of that opportunity? So I think that's a great point. Yeah, we communicate, we work with communications. There was just a piece in the intercom or communications vehicle that just came out about school breakfast and lunch. So we continue to work with them to try to keep it a regular reminder that that's out there. Because one of the things we learned, we had been providing free breakfast for years. And the fact that when we went community eligibility, we saw this increase in breakfast participation, it just reaffirmed that, wow, there's a lot of people out there who just didn't know. So I do think that that's still something that we need to continue to focus on. Yes, ma'am.
And to that point of not only educating the parents, do you work with Steve Simmons in transportation? Because for a while, if your bus is late, you miss breakfast. And so I know we were having some challenges with some routes, and they were working to make sure, you know, it makes a difference if your child's bus is late because you miss breakfast. And we heard that from a few communities, and he really helped when we rerouted buses to make sure the students could get there in time to eat breakfast. And so,
well, in every school I know of, and I word it like that because we have a lot of schools, but every school I know of, if the students aren't there because the bus is late, they still provide them the opportunity to have breakfast. Because, you know, we're heading into the winter months. There will be late buses, no matter what we do. So when the bus is late and the students are coming, like I said, every school I know of, they still provide their students an opportunity to get breakfast. Because there's a high likelihood it wasn't the student's fault that bus is late, and they still need that to be able to be prepared to learn that day. The other thing we do focus on, we talked about, is the biggest thing we focus on several areas from participation. One of them is from a communication standpoint. The two other areas we focus on, in large part, are customer service, reiterating to our staff on a very regular basis that our students, they may be students, they may be young adults or children, but they're our customers. And unless they're satisfied, unless they're happy coming through our line, we're not going to be there. Our job is to be there for them. And we continually reiterate that message. The other one is menu selection. You know, you got to have menu items that the kids will want. That has been more challenging over the past couple of years. There have been significant changes to the National School Lunch Program. And truly, I believe those changes are good. Shifting to whole grains, adding more fruits and vegetables. Doing all those things I think are really good things. That being said, to a kid who maybe got French fries every day for 5 years, and now, you know, that were fried in a fryer, and now French fries aren't available anymore, that can be a dissatisfier to that kid. So we educate them, we try to provide good products, but there are some changes. And it used to be, I tell people, you know, years ago, when I first started here, and I haven't been here that long, but 7 years ago, we made menu decisions. We have 3 factors in our menu decision. We have, are the kids going to like it? And 7 years ago, this is the way we made the decisions. First, we said, are the kids going to like it? Then we said, what does it cost? And then we said, okay, how does it fit into our nutritional requirements? Now that has turned full 180, and we say, how does it fit into our nutritional requirements? What's it cost? And are the kids going to like it? Because we don't want to take things to the school and have kids try them if we know we can't afford them. We don't want to take things to the school and have kids try them if we know they're not going to fit within the nutritional requirements of the program. So I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but I am saying that it's changed 180 from where it was 7 years ago.
So Joe, how do you then measure some of the waste? So if you serve pears one week and they all end up in the trash, do you think pears might not be a good thing? Let's stick to apples.
We've got a number of ways we get feedback on that. First and foremost, we get it from our staff. They let us know right away if kids like stuff and if they don't, which is very valuable. But we also do some more quantitative studies or gather more quantitative information. Another one is, what are they taking? You know, I can look at what we're purchasing off of our vendors, get velocity reports to know what we're purchasing, to know what our students are taking, because we produce what they take, or we put out what they take. And if you order pears and they don't take any, well, then that same case of pears is going to be there all week. If they really like the pears and you got to get another case in every day, you can look at that velocity type report and understand that these are the items that they're taking. And sometimes those are more valuable than what they actually say they're going to take, because I go back to if you go around and ask everybody, are you going to eat healthy or eat more fruits and vegetables? People always say, yes, I'm going to do that. But their dollars don't always match where their mind and their hearts are. So you got to use both. You know, you got to try to predict where they're going to go, but you also got to know where they're at right now. The third one is we do plate waste studies. So we do, and that's not something we do every day. That's something we take a sample and we go into schools and we look at their plates. It's a great exercise if anybody would like to join us. There's a table sitting by the garbage can and there's somebody there and they receive that plate and they're noting, you know, usually it's by quarter. They ate a quarter of the apple, they ate half their piece of pizza, and they drank their whole milk. You know, and this is what's left. And
Using the auditor's team for that?
We do support from the auditors. But we do those types of studies as well to gather that information. So we use all those different pieces of information to try to make the best decisions we can as far as what our students will eat.
So I'd be remiss if I didn't ask the 7th and the 9th grade question about mystery meat. And do we ever use students in taste testing?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Most, I won't say all because sometimes it's not practical, but in most cases, new items that we bring on our menu, we have our students try them before we do them. We'll do samples in different schools. If it's the summer, sometimes we'll utilize our students that are participating in the summer feeding program. But I would say in excess of 80% of the items that come on our menu have been tried by students prior to them putting on the menu. The reason some don't is sometimes the manufacturer will say, we're not making that anymore. And then we've got to come and we've got to shift it, we've got to do something different. And sometimes the time frame doesn't allow us to maybe do as much as we would like to do. But in probably in excess of 80%, students have tried those food items before we make a change. Now that being said, I will tell you, one thing I noticed when I first started here 7 years ago, one thing I like to do, especially in elementary schools, I'll go into elementary school, I'll walk around and talk to the kids, and usually I have two questions. What are your favorite things on the menu? What are your least favorite things on the menu? I'll go to one school and they'll tell me they can't stand the cheeseburger. 20 minutes later, I go 2 miles up the road and go to another school and they tell me the cheeseburger is their favorite thing on the menu. So, you know, we do have some of that, and we have to explain it to our staff. Although that may not be a particularly popular item in your school, we look at it from a district-wide standpoint, and it is a pretty popular item. So we do look when we make our menu changes, and every year we make menu changes twice a year, at the beginning of the year and after the holiday break. Because if we're going to change the pizza we're going to serve, well, I serve 63,000 meals a day. It's not going into Kroger and saying, I'm going to buy this one instead of that one. The people who produce those products, make those products, they need to plan for our volume so that they can plan ahead. So we change menus twice a year, and we plan ahead in doing so. And typically we look at how much, what people are taking, we look at what are they wasting, and then we'll go in and look and see what some new items are that'll make sense to replace them with, and we'll sample those with kids.
So just a bit on your cheeseburger example, will you also check to see if, you know, the warming equipment, maybe at the one school, is everything okay?
Absolutely.
So the cheeseburger is good to eat, you know.
And we have production records
Okay.
that we do every day that includes taking temperatures of food. You know, last week we had Professional Development Day and Records Day, and we took those days to take advantage. We've got a wonderful partnership with Columbus Public Health. They do a lot for us, and I think they view it as a partnership as well. They're not a regulatory agency with us, although that's part of their role. It's truly a partnership. So last week on Monday and Tuesday, which was our professional development days and our records day, in their facility, they took half my staff one day and the other half the other day, and they did a 5-hour training on food safety. And that's the way we keep them up to make, because in that training, I said to our staff, you know, sometimes I'm remiss because I talk about keeping our students happy. I talk about making sure they get fed so they're, from a nutritional standpoint, they're prepared to learn. And I think that's incredibly important. I said sometimes I take for granted that we're going to do that and not make them any less prepared to learn. That we're not going to make them sick, that we're not going to put them in a position where their ability to learn or their ability to be healthy is compromised. And the only reason I say I take that for granted is because it should be a given. That should be the very basement of what we do. That being said, that doesn't happen by accident. You know, there are things we need to do and things we need to be current on and things we need to continue to train on to make sure that we do that. Because that is truly the absolute. If kids don't like the hamburger I served today, I want to get them a hamburger they like better. But that's not the end of the world. If we make kids sick and compromise their health, that is a totally different situation. And that is something that we can't tolerate. So I'll try to keep moving along quickly. Lunch participation, very much the same. Our participation rate is 73.8% of enrollment. Lunch counts were up 6.5% from one year to the next. And we do benchmark in the top quartile with the Council of Great City Schools. Their median for lunch is 62.8%. So we do a pretty good job. Still some opportunity, but we do a pretty good job. Oops, one too many. Next primary driver is around labor cost. Our labor cost is 45.9% of revenue. Now that is down 7.4% in fiscal year 15. Now that has more to do with revenue going up than with labor expense going down. Labor went up a little bit, but since we saw, because the way these costs are figured, it's a percent of your revenue. And since we saw such good increases in revenue and significantly smaller increases in our cost for, you know, labor, salary, and benefits, then we saw a significant decrease in our labor cost percentage. We do benchmark in the bottom quartile for labor costs. Now, we used to be right near the bottom. Now we're more around that 25th percentile, so we know that's one of the areas where we benchmark at a lower point. Thus, the Council of Great City Schools median for labor costs, by the way, is 41.5%, so our costs are higher than the median. Now, one assumption that might be made, if somebody would look at that, is overstaffed, or maybe the staff aren't being as productive as they could be, which is the reason that we look at meals per labor hour as well. I think they need to go hand in hand. Meals per labor hour is our measure of productivity. So it takes how many meals and how many hours it takes to produce them, and that is a nationally benchmarked standard. We are at 20.9. We benchmark in the top quartile for meals per labor hour. The national median is 16.2. So what I typically say about this is my staff work very hard. They're productive, they work very hard in taking care of our students. That being said, they're compensated well for doing so between their salary and benefits package. So those two items have to go, I think it's important that they go hand in hand and that people understand that, because I'll be honest with you, when I first got here, the general thought was food service was overstaffed because the labor cost was high. And I don't believe that's the case. I believe that we constantly need to look at efficiencies and figure out how we can do things better. That being said, we have national benchmarks that demonstrate that we're not significantly overstaffed.
As I recall, I was involved looking at this a couple years ago, that you just also, it's a scenario where there are a lot of there are a lot of folks that have been with the district a long time, and so you have a lot of veteran staff.
You're absolutely right. We do have staff with high seniority, and with high seniority typically comes a higher rate of salary. Also, what comes with that is great expertise and great experience in them doing their job. But those two things go hand in hand typically. So,
Have you done some analysis of, anticipated retirement trends or anything based on?
we haven't done a lot of
seniority?
analysis
Mhm.
as far as, we have seen more retirements in the past couple of years, but it's probably a good idea, to your point, to do some analysis and try to figure out where we think we might be in the next 3 years.
Well, both from a expense standpoint and also from a needs standpoint.
Yes.
So do some succession planning as well.
Yes. Our final driver is food and supplies. Food and supplies cost us 40.8%. That is down 5.2% from the prior year. And a lot of that really does come from the benefit of having, everybody I think has heard the expression that sales hides a lot of things. You add the increased revenue, and that was a benefit for us. And one example of how that's a benefit for us is typically, in the elementary school, we have 3 menu offerings every day. In the middle school, it's 5. In the high school, it's 7. It's our expectation that every child has a choice of all those menu items every time they come through the line every day. Now, sometimes that doesn't work out. Sometimes there are flukes. But that is our expectation. If that's our expectation, there's going to be some waste because you're going to have to overproduce some. And we typically, we shoot for a waste factor under 5%. At the elementary school, we look for meals. We want to have between 5 and 10 meals a day left over at the end. And if they're in that 5 to 10 meal range, then they did a good job of managing their waste and managing their orders. Well, when we increased participation, the waste amount didn't increase significantly. In fact, it stayed the same, or in some instances went down some. So we're not seeing more waste, but we're serving more meals. And in doing that, you see a reduction typically in your operating cost for food and supplies. The Council of Great City Schools doesn't benchmark food and supplies together, which is the way we group it. So we don't have a great benchmark from them, but what I will share with you is they do benchmark food costs, and I don't have food costs broken out, but their median for food costs is 41.9%. And we're running 40.8 when you include food and supplies. So we feel pretty good that we're managing that efficiently. That is my final slide. The only other thing you have in your packet is a little bit of an eye chart. I understand that, so I apologize for that. But this is just our projection through the end of the year, where we are right now. So this has through October actuals, and then projections November through June. And it just shows that, right now we're projecting, these numbers can be misleading, and here's why. If you look at the projected total, the third to the last column at the end, it says our excess in revenue is $3,137,000. And if you remember up on the board, I had $2 million and some change. That's because if you look at July on here, and you see under federal reimbursement in July, there's $910,000 in reimbursement. When I do these comparisons, I move that back into the year where that money was earned. So when I compare year to year, because we didn't get a portion of our reimbursement for May until July, I move it back for comparison purposes to make sure it's in the year where it was actually learned, because that way we're comparing more apples to apples. So that's why when you look at that number, it was $2 million, but on here it's $3 million. But if you look on the very third to the last one, ending cash fund balance at the end of the year, we're projecting to end at about $6.8 million. And if we do end at that point, that puts us in a situation where we're not having to take those advances from the general fund throughout the beginning of next year.
Is this 8.3 net of your advances?
I mean, that should be taken out. I mean, we would have advanced those dollars back once the balance built up. So the 6.8 is the number that does not include any advances.
Right, so
Right now, the $8 million includes the $1.5 million that we advanced this month.
okay, so we need to, right.
Yeah.
So we would take with the.
So if you take the 1.5 out of the 8.3,
Right,
you get
right.
it's
Yeah, it's
subtracted,
kind of
but you got to go up.
That's right, I'm with you. Okay.
Okay?
So,
to that point, congratulations.
Thank you.
Very excited. There was a time when food service dominated our conversations for a very long time, and we look forward to the day where we had a positive balance.
Well, we would still like to dominate your conversations.
Yes.
We would just like to do it from a different standpoint.
Very happy enough. But to the part about drivers also, just so people don't think that, I think school culture is also a driver. In my kids' school, they have fruit ninjas. And to your point about parents volunteer to be fruit ninjas because kids may not eat an apple, but they come in and they slice them up. And they volunteer to cut up the pears. And if you have a pear and it slices, the younger kids are more apt to eat them than to eat whole.
Yeah.
So they do that. And they've been in schools where the whole school packs lunch. You have a high packing school in some of our buildings. And so maybe only a handful of kids actually would necessarily take a school lunch because a ton of them in the early grades, bring their lunch, and as they get older, I don't want to bring a lunch box. You know, then I don't know how the cool factor weighs in middle and high school, but it was a big thing to pack. And I'm telling the kids, you're wrecking my budget here. You know, we got a food service budget, but school culture also plays a part, and really thank them because they'll drink the milk and they'll buy the other items. And they may do breakfast, but pack lunch, or pack breakfast and then buy lunch. So it's not as monolithic as people think.
No, and school culture will impact how we address participants. There's certain things we do at a district level, menu we do at a district level. But some of the service things and presentation things, we would do more at the school level. And then, okay, how do we impact it at the school level and how do we help them? Because you're right, there's different cultures. We have, not everybody got a banner. A lot of our schools did, but a lot of them didn't. We have different participation rates, and we have different barriers to participation at different schools. And barriers may not be a fair word, but the different reasons why they might be at different levels. So we need to, although we have some global things that we address, we also have some things we need to address school by school. We work with the staff in that school, the administrator in the school, to try to work on those issues on a case-by-case basis.
Sorry.
I just want to say, I think the community eligibility is it's a paradigm shift. I mean, that gives us like a benefit to say, hey, when you're in the Columbus City schools, breakfast and lunch are included, you know, and that's something that maybe the charters or community schools can't offer, so.
Agreed.
We actually saw the free lunch presentation at Council of Great City Schools a few years and came back and like, Joe, do this, check it out. Cleveland debuted Universal Breakfast first, and then they were going down the Universal Lunch or Community Inclusion next, and we were like, if they can do it, we can do it. And the team has implemented it very well.
And it takes away the bureaucracy piece of it too, where people have to direct certify and, oh, you're in that line, so now I'm yeah.
Well, it is much easier to manage. The other things it takes away is any sort of stigmatism toward any child. So it's a huge benefit.
So I just have two
Reggie,
quick
did you-
questions.
Sure.
Yep. So from a long-term standpoint, have you given thought to the elementary meal process versus the secondary meal process in terms of the efficiency of each program and how it may benefit you long-term to deliver, I mean, one obviously has you bringing food distribution in, preparing it, and then resending it out to the sites, whereas you have a direct link where you can just put it at the schools. I didn't know if you guys had any studies or had thought about maybe looking at that going forward.
We do. From a pure efficiency standpoint, the centralized model is certainly more efficient. That's not the only factor in the decision, though, because with the centralized model, you are limited in the type of options you can provide.
Right.
You are, it's the number, not only the type, but the number of options. With the decentralized model, you've got more flexibility. You can do things fresher.
Right.
For an older, more discriminating student base.
I understand.
So we have looked at it. We've talked about it. There are some large school districts that have tried to make that shift, And because they looked at it from an efficiency standpoint, which is absolutely important, and said, this is more efficient, we need to serve all of our schools that way. And in doing so, they saw significant declines in participation, and then it ended up biting them on the back end, because then the revenue wasn't there to be able to support it. So we do look at it on a regular basis. We talk about, on occasion is probably not the right way to say it, but regularly, the future of the Food Service Production Center. It's a 40-year-old building, 40-plus-year-old building. It's, eventually something's going to need, it's either going to need significant upgrades. I mean, we're talking about floors right now, but eventually it's going to need more.
That's right.
Or maybe a new facility built. And when we move forward to that sort of thing, do we stay with the model we have? Do we try to expand that model? Do we? So we do have those discussions. I'd be lying if I told you we had a firm plan and what that looks like.
I'm just seeing if you just brainstorming.
Yeah, we are.
And the other thought was, have you ever thought about putting another oar in the water in that you're offering product to third parties, where you offer your services because you're a production facility? Are there other school districts or other clients that you may be able to look at, identify a price point for your product? And I'm just blue sky, and I just think you have a building, you generate a product. Does somebody want that product? Because you do it well, you could be a provider of those same services.
We look at that a little bit. We provide, like I said, we provide over 1 million meals during the summer for other entities. One of the challenges with that, which doesn't mean it's not possible, but one of the things you got to look at is the regulatory requirements when it comes to food labeling, when it comes to, that is significantly greater. So in order to do that, there are some things we would need to upgrade and change. We've talked about it. The challenge I think we face with something like that, and it's not just us, it's anybody who's a business this size who wants to take it to that size. Sometimes you have that investment and you're going to do it on faith that business is going to be there later.
That's right.
And if that business isn't there later, then you've got this investment that you're not able to offset. And we've been hesitant to take that leap thus far. But it is something that we talk about regularly.
Yep.
As far as be it charter schools, be it other school districts within the suburbs, some other areas that we potentially could support. Again, if we're producing the sandwich for 44 cents and someone else is producing it for 74, maybe I can sell it for 70 cents and still, still make some money and they're ahead as well.
That's right.
But we're not quite there yet.
Would that affect our community, the CEP?
Probably not.
I mean, yeah, you can set up a separate entity.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm just thinking capacity.
Yeah.
And
Oh, no,
how do you, maximize your space and your resources? But
I appreciate it.
That's, if you look at redoing the building, it might make sense to do 3 buildings, closer to where they're delivering instead of the centralized, where those meals must be traveling quite a ways for some.
For some, yeah, that's what Orlando's doing. They're building, and they're bigger than us. They're a countywide school district. It's not Orlando. It's whatever the county's called down there. I can't remember. But they're bigger than us, and they're building multiple sites around the city to be able to support their operations, because rather than build one giant facility and have it that increased travel costs, it makes more sense for them to do it like that. So I think that's a great point.
Great. Well, this has been a very good, very informative. Thank you, Joe, very much.
Thank you for having me.
And congratulations on the
awards.
multiple
Yeah,
awards.
recognition.
President Baker, we heard the good news from the OSB conference. We thought it might be good to have everyone hear that on Tuesday.
And real quick, if I may,
Yes.
I just wanted to
Oh,
comment,
yes.
as just to the comments that we were just talking about facility-wise, this will be another one of those topics that we'll be tackling
Right.
this winter, of those facilities as well, and the menu of options that they could pick from and we could consider.
Sounds good.
Okay. So is there any additional business to come before the committee? Hearing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor? I think we stand adjourned. Thank you.
When is our next?